Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamualaikum and good afternoon, everyone. Okay, my name Nur Suzila Suhaimi, and our team for this study consists of Dr. Marfuniza and Dr. Muhammad Naim Ajis from School of Government, University Utara Malaysia. And we also have one international scholar, Professor Dr. Trinuka from Badan Riset and Inovasi National Indonesia. So basically, we are researcher in the field of housing and migration. Therefore, today I would like to present a conceptual study, a title, and overview of the right to adequate housing for a migrant. Okay. Alright, so these are our contents that will be presented, introduction, research objective, a finding and conclusions. Alright, for the introductions, first we observe the distinction between migrants and refugees. Uh, these two terms look similar, but there are differences. So the similarity between migrant and refugee is referred to people who are seeking a new home in the other country. So what is the difference between these migrants and refugee? Simply speaking, I can say that a migrant is someone who choose to move outside, to choose to move another country. While for refugee is someone who has been forced from their home or from their country. Um, okay. Uh, housing and migrations, yeah, housing and migration have always been linked, always been closely linked, particularly in the case of unwanted migrants who were forced to leave their home and had been mistreated, already that they has been mistreated or were terrified of it and look for shelter abroad. Uh, Also, housing and living conditions for migrants are important aspect of the migration experience, and inadequate housing is a significant factor in migrant witnesses to offenses of human right or labor right. These topics are less attention. Um, Therefore, our group, this conceptual study seek to explore migrants' housing. All right. Uh, this study has three main objectives, which consists of number one, to explain adequate housing and impact. Number two, to identify challenges in the providing housing for migrants. And number three, to eliminate approaches that has been adopted from others nation or others country. Okay, before we answer the research question one, we would like to present about the key elements of the right to adequate housing. They have about seven, which number one is security of the tenure. Here mean if the resident tenure security does not provide legal protections from forced removal or harassments and other streets, that means the housing is not adequate. And point number two is availability of services. Here mean if the home resident leak sanitation facility, safe drinking water, proper sanitation and energy for lighting, cooking, heating, or food storage, That means the home is not adequate. And number three is about the affordability. We know that affordability is a normal issue, right? If the expenses of the home affect restrict the tenant ability to fulfill their basic need or their other human right, means that the house is not appropriate. And point number five is about the habitability. Here means housing is insufficient if it does not ensure physical safety, offer enough space, and offer protection to the a tenant or to the resident. All right. Another point is about accessibility. Okay. How this point is about the housing is not adequate if the specific needs of disadvantaged group are not taken into account. And another point is about the location. Location is referred to the housing. If not, the housing is not adequate if it far away from the workplace or healthcare services and other social facility, means that or the house is located at the polluted area, means that the house is not adequate or is not sufficient. And the last point is about the cultural adequacy. All right. Here means that the house is not adequate if it does not respect or take into account the expression of the cultural identity. Okay. This the research question number one. Okay. The result indicate that housing is a central important to physical health, mental health, and well-being and safety. I give a few examples. Okay. For example, physical of housing, such as a poor condition of housing or overcrowding, that's negatively impact their health and well-being. And similar that insecure housing has also been linked to negative mental health outcome, particularly for women, because they are concerned about the safety, about their safety. All right. So these three elements, the most or the significant elements that give the negative impact to the adequate housing. Okay. All right. Research question number two. We want to identify the challenges in providing housing for migrants. Right. We found that they have four significant points. Actually they have others, but this 4 point is the most significant. All right. First is about the lack of access to specific housing tenure, such as home ownership, private rent, or social housing. And point number two is about the lack of information about the housing alternative or scheme. For example, lack of information, bureaucratic procedure, regulation in the housing or tenant right, and which is this often combined to make it difficult to proceed adequate housing. And point number three is about the lack of housing affordability. Lack of affordable housing has been widely recognized as one of the most challenging, because the lack of housing affordability lead those on the lower income to seek housing that is cheaper and often a lower quality. And finally, it's about the absence of the legal documentation. Okay, research question number 3 is about the to eliminate approaches that have been adopted from other countries. All right, here means this is based on the case study. We found a few strategy from other country. All right, so point number one. Point number one is about the utilizing existing and vacant housing stock. And point number two, improving access of migrant and refugee to social housing. Point number three, the role of housing cooperative in providing housing to migrant and refugee. And point number four is modular housing unit for migrant and refugee. And finally, improving mechanism for access to adequate housing, which is this related to the housing policy or other regulations. All right. Um, okay. For the conclusions, access to adequate and insufficient housing has a substantial impact on migrant worker overall standard of living, well-being, and others human and labor rights. Lack of housing option for migrant worker has long been a feature of the global housing crisis, and housing is a key social predictor of physical and mental health as well as safety. The findings show that housing play a crucial role in health and well-being and had an impact on actually a number of different touch points, including affordability, suitability of housing in terms of physical aspect like condition and social aspect like safety and belonging, as well as issue with security of tenant. And according to a country's suitability, a strategy and approach from other nations can be modified and can use as direction to minimize or to solve this issue. All right, that's all my presentation. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.